Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please welcome the Margaret and Terry Stent Director, Stephanie Stebish.
Welcome to the virtual preview at the Renwick Gallery of the 9th installment of the Renwick Invitational. I offer a warm welcome to the 4 artists we are celebrating tonight: Lauren Fensterstock, Timothy Horn, Debora Moore, my friend from the Pacific Northwest, and Rowland Ricketts, as well as their family and friends. We're delighted to have over 700 people joining us this evening from across the country, as well as all the way from Japan. It's remarkable that we can do this online, because I assure you we couldn't squeeze all of you into our Renwick Rubinstein Grand Salon for remarks as we typically do for openings. So that's the silver lining, is to have you join us virtually. Let me provide you a brief history of this fabulous exhibition series. The Renwick Invitational occurs every 2 years or so. It's a biennial series, and it was established in 2000, thanks to the vision and generosity of Rina and Melvin Cohen. The focus has been on highlighting outstanding craft artists who are deserving of wider national recognition, and we focus on mid-career artists. I offer special thanks to Rina Cohen and the entire Cohen family, also for the endowment support that makes this program possible year in and year out. I'd also like to share with you the many generous supporters who have made the project possible, not only the exhibition, but the handsome catalog. And you'll see on the slide the many names, beginning with the Carolyn Small Alper Exhibitions Fund. Again, many thanks to all these generous individuals for supporting us. I want to also applaud the work of our juror and guest curator, Emily Zilber, who organized this year's invitational. She selected a theme that seems prescient: forces of nature, a topic that she landed on before COVID-19 arrived in our worlds, and it could not be more timely. Again, we are all seeking solace in nature, and these 4 artists, with the beautiful works that they have created, and in some cases created specifically for Renwick galleries, offer us so much inspiration. So again, thank you to Lauren Fensterstock, Timothy Horn, Debora Moore, and Rowland Ricketts. They invite us to explore what it means to be truly human in a world that is increasingly chaotic and in many ways divorced from our physical landscape. I offer you the promise of a special evening tonight. You'll be hearing from Emily directly, as well as the artists about their work and their process. Please know how delighted we are we can offer you such programming free of charge, again, thanks to the funding of supporters like you and the others already noted. Please consider making a donation to the museum tonight. It's very simple. There's a donate button on our event website to make a gift. And so I thank you in advance for your generous support, so that SAAM can continue to offer robust and lively programs during these challenging times. I know we can't gather in person this evening, as I noted at the top of my remarks, but we do celebrate together collectively, because these are exceptional artists and their artwork gives us so much hope and joy, as well as creating a sense of awe. If you're able, please do come by the Renwick. We have reopened. Our hours are the same as before, 10 to 5:30. We have reduced the number of days we're open, however, Wednesday through Sunday. We do this to ensure a safe and welcoming environment. The Renwick Invitational officially opens on October 16th, and thankfully will be on view through the summer of 2021 through June 27th, so you have some time to come down. I also want to point out that when you arrive, you'll be delighted to see a fan favorite, Janet Eckelman's 1.8 Renwick, especially commissioned in 2015 for the Great Wonder exhibition that marked the renovation of our great building. It hangs wonderfully in the Rubinstein Grand Salon, along with a custom-made carpet. It is highlighted with great lighting effects that make this aerial sculpture dance delightfully over your heads. There are images of this as well. So I also want to share something we're planning in the future, and I look forward to your good thoughts about how we do this best. Did you know in 2022, the Renwick celebrates its 50th anniversary? And we'll have a robust series again of programs and exhibitions and scholarly offerings for you. I also want to mention that today we are fully staffed at the Renwick. We have 3 great curators there: Nora Atkinson, LaFleur, and Charles Bressler, curator in charge. She'll speak next. Recently, Mary Savig joined us as the Lloyd Herman Curator of Craft. She comes from our sister Smithsonian Research unit called the Archives of American Art. And we have also added earlier this year Anya Montiel. She is our Curator of American and Native American Women's Art. It's a joint position funded by the American Women's History Initiative, and she splits her time between us and the National Museum of the American Indian. I look forward to your getting to know them all better in the future. And mostly, I look forward to seeing you back in our galleries. When you're comfortable to do so, our doors are open and the museum is singing with great presentations of art, from our permanent collection to the Janet Eckelman, and of course, to the 2020 Renwick Invitational.
Thanks, Stephanie, and hello, everyone. I'm happy to see so many of you here, albeit virtually, to celebrate with us the 4 amazing artists we've selected for this year's Renwick Invitational: Lauren Fensterstock, Timothy Horn, Debora Moore, and Rowland Ricketts. As you can imagine, this year's Invitational has been a little bit of a wild ride. We started out about 2 years ago when I invited my colleagues Stefano Catalani and Emily Zilber to join me on this year's jury panel. You'll know Stefano from his former role as artistic director at Bellevue Arts Museum. He's currently the executive director of Gage Academy of Art in Seattle. And Emily Zilber, formerly of the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and now the director of curatorial affairs at the Wharton Eschrick Museum. So we got together in person back when you actually could to talk over who we wanted to nominate this year. And for those of you who have heard me talk about this exhibition before, you'll know that it's always a little bit of a chicken or egg game. We're always looking to include artists who are at the very top of their game, deserving of recognition at this moment, but at the same time, we always try to settle on a unifying theme that brings them together. So I have to say, jury panels can be all over the board. But I think our group this year had amazing chemistry, and I think it shows in the final exhibition. So I really couldn't be more pleased. And I'm grateful to Stefano and Emily for all of their insights, the insightful essays that they added to the catalog as well. And I should mention that the catalog is gorgeous. It's available online through a link in the live stream agenda for tonight. So you'll be able to follow that link and get a little discount to that catalog if you'd like to. And whether you get a chance to see the exhibition in person or not, I highly encourage you to pick that up. So this year, as we set out in the jury room, we were already thinking a couple of years back as we were starting the process that we were utterly exhausted by the political landscape, the last election cycle. We were surrounded by a lot of heavy news, and we were kind of looking for relief. And so we quickly coalesced around the idea of nature as a place that we wanted to go with this exhibition, as a source for understanding our place in the world and thinking about the tumultuous times we live in as kind of a silent, constant observer, something that we need to protect, a source of solace and refuge and wonder. And I think that comes through in the galleries. Now, the Invitational is historically, I think, a very important show. As Stephanie mentioned, it began in 2000 with an exhibition curated by Ken Trapp called 5 Women in Craft. Since then, it's featured a tour de force of artists from Judith Schachter to Matthias Pleissnig to Stephen Young Lee, Tanya Aguinega, Jennifer Trask, Sharif Bey, the list goes on and on. Before I came to Renwick, I remember the first time I ever saw the work of Beth Kavanagh was in one of the invitationals. So I think we're very proud of the role we've played in bolstering the careers of some of the biggest names in craft. Artists often take this opportunity to really showcase their best work, and certainly this year does not disappoint. The artists absolutely brought it. We are debuting a new installation from an entirely new series by Lauren Fensterstock. This will be only the second iteration and the first in the US of a multi-sensory room scale installation by Rowland Ricketts. Debora Moore's breathtaking project Arborea is also making its East Coast debut. And Timothy Horn has brought both past crowd favorites and brand new work, all at monumental scale in metal, glass, and rock sugar. So it's really an incredible show. The last Renwick Invitational had something like 80 plus pieces in it. This one has a dozen, so you can really immerse. And we've produced a montage of images and video of the galleries specifically for this event, which we'll intersperse through the program. So you can get a sense of things, whether you're able to visit in person, hopefully someday, or whether you are only able to experience it virtually through the images and video and catalog in this event. In this event, before we get on with the program, I do just have a couple of quick thank yous I'd like to make. First, I wanted to echo Stephanie in our sincerest thanks to the donors to this exhibition, particularly to the Rina and Melvin Cohen Family Foundation, who have made this exhibition series possible from the start. I know that I have seen a few members of the James Renwick Alliance here, so I would love to say hello to them and thank them. And the Women's Committee, who many of whom might not be here this evening. I know they have a conflicting event tonight, but they've been very generous in sponsoring the exhibition's programming, allowing us to pivot to a virtual platform. And so please look ahead to some of the wonderful programs with the individual artists that will be coming in the next few months. Huge thanks to our 4 artists, Rowland, Lauren, Debora, and Tim, for working with us through the trials and tribulations of this extraordinary time. This is the first time we've ever tried to do virtual installations. It's been remarkable. So you all deserve a huge round of applause for everything that you've been able to accomplish. I'm so proud of the work that we have on view from you at Renwick, and so proud that we could be part of your stories. I also want to give a shout out quickly to our exhibitions team, registrars, the folks putting on this program, and the other folks behind the curtain. This is a remarkable feat to do in this environment, so I thank you all. And last but not least, I want to thank our guest curator, Emily Zilber. Emily, sincerely thank you for taking this on. It has been so incredible to work with you. I can't wait to hear what you and the artists have to say. And with that, I will pass it to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora and Stephanie, for beautifully setting the stage and for inviting me to be a part of this year's Invitational. It's been a privilege to work on the current iteration of this important series, and I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce you tonight to the artists featured in Forces of Nature. The ways that artists engage with the natural world is a topic that's at once timeless and of critical importance to our current moment. It's critical to craft as well. One of the many ways we might understand craft is as an act of mediation between culture and earthly resources that allows us to explore who we are and how we belong to the world. Is it any wonder that we return to nature in moments that feel beyond our control? The artists in this year's exhibition, and you can see them here on the screen, Lauren Fensterstock, Timothy Horn, Debora Moore, and Rowland Ricketts, understand that both nature and art have the capacity to reframe perspectives and to offer moments of release. They make work that is in part about how human activity meets the physical environment in overarching cosmic ways and in the microscopic details. I want to introduce you to these 4 brilliant artists who are indeed forces of nature. While I'm sharing background information about their biographies and work, you'll get a chance to see the artists and images of their pieces on your screen. Once the introductions have finished, we'll come together for a conversation followed by a Q&A. So we'll start with Lauren. Trained as a metalsmith, Lauren Fensterstock creates detailed installations and objects using labor-intensive modes of making with deep histories in the decorative arts, including paper cutting and quilling, mosaic, and shell work. She's an unconventional landscape architect, using her own research into garden history to better understand the way humans have manipulated the natural world to express their own views and values. For Forces of Nature, Lauren has created the site-specific installation, The Totality of Time Lusters the Dusk. And you're seeing some detail shots here. of that piece. It's the first iteration in a new body of work, exploring how both weather and celestial activity have been used as metaphor. This is an especially powerful idea now, as our climate changes rapidly in relationship to human action and inaction. And even so, Lauren found inspiration for this work in a 16th century manuscript titled The Book of Miracles, which details extreme weather events thought to be the result of divine intervention. I want to move to Timothy Horn now. Timothy's work centers on dialogues between nature and culture. He draws inspiration from historical objects, narratives, and ways of making, including Baroque decorative arts and adornment. A native of Melbourne, Australia, Horn has lived and worked in the US since 2002. Trained in both sculpture and glassmaking, he has an uncanny ability to seize on the seductive qualities of his chosen materials. He creates hybrid objects that speak to the inherent artistry and resilience of the natural world. Timothy's represented in this exhibition by a suite of objects, including 3 wall pieces made between 2016 and 2020. These oversized works of adornment link biological renderings of species, including lichen and coral, to European court jewels. Horn's iconic mother lode, a fairy tale carriage encrusted with rock sugar that retells the story of a famous art collector and the sugar trade, asks important questions about how nature exists and is exploited or repackaged as a commodity under capitalism. Since the late 1980s, Debora Moore has explored the expressive potential of flora through glass. Focusing largely on orchids, she has observed and sketched specimens around the globe. Moore creates objects which capture her own transformative personal experiences with the wonder of the natural world, and she holistically transports those experiences into the gallery. She does this in part through her remarkable mastery of her craft, cultivated over years as a trailblazer in the glass community of the Pacific Northwest. Forces of Nature features 4 works in Debora's 2018 Arborea series, the first time they'll be seen on the East Coast, a suite of immaculately crafted and evocative glass trees that began nearly a decade ago as images in her sketchbook. Wisteria, magnolia, cherry, and winter plum are scaled to life and reflect the cycle of the seasons. They are full of beauty in contradiction. They are at once strong and fragile, natural and fabricated, technically astonishing and seemingly effortless. For the past 2 decades, indigo, the iconic blue dye naturally derived from plants, has been Rowland Ricketts' primary medium and subject matter. Rowland uses traditional Japanese processes to create artworks, including multi-sensory installations that embrace indigo's depth of meaning. His approach inextricably links process and product. Ricketts farms indigo in Bloomington, Indiana, where he also serves as the Associate Dean of the Eskenazi School of Art, Architecture, and Design at Indiana University. Forces of Nature marks the US debut of Ai no Keshiki, Indigo Views, which was originally developed in the Japanese prefecture of Tokushima. Reconfigured for the Renwick Gallery, the installation is the result of Ricketts' work with 450 global collaborators who each lived with one of the cloths that you're seeing on the screen in their home. The subtle variation in shades of blue not only reminds us of natural cycles of change and time, but also helps generate an enveloping soundscape in the gallery, designed by Ricketts' frequent collaborator, Norbert Herber. And you'll hear a little bit more about this later on, but for this iteration of the project, Rowland worked with the Renwick team to guide the lighting program through COVID-19 related statistics. So an incredibly diverse and varied and talented group of practitioners. I'm so thrilled to be here with them tonight. Without further ado, let's begin our chat with these amazing artists. I'd love to start with a question for the whole group. One of the things that drew Nora, Stefano, and I to each of your work is the specificity with which you think about the conversation between creativity and nature. Can you share a little more about how these two very big concepts are in relationship in your practice? And I'll ask Timothy to start.
Thanks, Emily. And I just wanted to echo Nora's words. Just a big thank you to everyone involved in the exhibition, and particularly the installation staff. It was an extraordinary effort, and it's the first time I've had to install these works without actually being present and via Zoom, and the team were absolutely extraordinary. So I feel like my conversation between creativity and nature really began when I encountered the work of 19th century zoologist Ernst Haeckel in his extraordinary book, Art Forms in Nature. So this was mid-19th century in an era before photography, and Haeckel was one of the first scientists to stare through a microscope and attempt to draw what he saw. He also made exquisite drawings of jellyfish, and called Medusa, which is named after the creature of Greek mythology. And it was his studies of Medusa jellyfish which inspired me to create a series of chandelier-like structures that I cast in transparent rubber. To make these works, I modeled the forms in clay and made simple two-part molds, and then poured silicone into those. And then stitched the cast forms together. So it was kind of like making an enormous prom frock using transparent skins of rubber. There was an armature concealed inside the work, and the work was lit by fiber optics, which mimicked the bioluminescence of jellyfish.
Thank you, Timothy. Debora, I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, the sort of relationship between these big concepts in your work. I think we're having an issue with Debora. Maybe while we wait for her to get started, we can move to Rowland or Lauren.
Okay, I'm back if you can hear me.
Yes, excellent. Hi, Debora.
Hi. Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. So, we're talking here about how each of you approach the conversation between creativity and nature with a degree of specificity that is intriguing. And we'd love to hear more about how those two big concepts relate to each other in your work.
Well, with my work, it really is important for me to start with all the little tiny details and observation. I go out in the field and I observe, and I like to use my mind's eye to see what I'm observing. Instead of taking photographs, I like to sketch what I think I see, because I really don't see that well. But when I see something that I think is beautiful, I like to just sketch it out and then take it into the shop and make it. My creative process is all about being happy and feeling at one with nature and peaceful. I need to have things peaceful around me. And the times that we're living in right now has played a big effect on my work, where I really don't feel at peace with everything. And I just feel that the creative process has a lot to do with the psyche and psychologically how you're feeling and physically how you're feeling. And one cannot help but to be empathetic to the pandemic and what is going on in the world today with climate change and the pandemic and just all the things that are going on, just one thing after another. So yes, it affects the creative process. It also affects the technical process. So. I hope I answered your question. I might have
You
gotten.
did. No, you did. You did. There's no wrong answers here. Rowland, I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, so I'd also like to quickly steal a second to thank the installation crew there and everyone we worked with on the exhibit, as well as the Cultural Affairs Division of the Tokushima Prefectural Office in Tokushima, which is the historic home to indigo in Japan. And these are the folks who initially invited me to develop the installation that we're showing in this exhibit. And I'd also like to say thanks to the 450 people from around the world who participated in the project and made it possible, as well as thank you to sound artist Norbert Herber, with whom I've collaborated for 9 years now, learning a lot and having a great time along the way. So the question, about the conversation between creativity and nature, for me, really began at the start of my own artistic career, which was as an apprentice in Tokushima, Japan, where I learned to grow and process and dye with indigo using historical techniques. So I also learned through my work there to really see the role of a craft-based artist as giving voice to the materials and processes that shape things I make, especially those things that aren't really necessarily evident in the final product. So I've continued to work with indigo for 24 years now, and because it takes a year to make the dye from seed, I've had a lot of time to look and observe, as Deborah said, and really observe that process. And it's become very, very clear to me over this time that the blue that I'm left with at the end of this long process is really so much more than just a color. I think that its DNA really contains the lives and knowledge of our collective ancestors who figured out how to transfer the blue from the leaves of all these different indigo plants to cloth. They did this across millennia and continents. And this is really intertwined with our own histories of exploitation and the possibilities of a better, more sustainable future. So to try and answer the question, I guess you could say that I kind of see nature as this invisible bicycle that's propelling us all forward, but that we kind of take for granted. And creativity is like a baseball card that as an artist I clip into the forks, and as it hits the spokes, the thwacking sound that it creates really makes us aware of the wheels spinning, and in turn, hopefully more aware of our own humanity and our connection and reliance on something much larger than ourselves.
Fantastic. Lauren, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Hello. Well, I echo the gratitude. It's been such an honor to be a part of this process and to work with you, Emily, and the entire team. So thank you. And as well to show with this wonderful artists. So what is the conversation between nature and creativity? I think just the fact that there's something that we call nature that we consider separate from us is in itself an act of human creativity. It's a cultural construction. And I'm really interested in the different ways that humans have defined what nature is and then depicted that in poetry, painting, philosophy. So often those depictions of nature serve as a place outside of ourselves where we project our anxieties, our sense of awe and wonder. And with this piece in particular, I'm looking at the ways that humans look to natural events as omens or signs, where a storm is a punishment or a shooting star means something calamitous is about to happen. I think that to interpret nature in this way is a creative process that people use to mirror back their own biases, hopes, and fears. And
I think that leads me to our next question. We're opening this show in a moment where in a lot of ways we seem to be in a kind of adversarial relationship to the natural world and what it can produce. So I'm thinking here not just about things like the epidemic, the wildfires in the West, a record-breaking hurricane season, and we've already mentioned our inability to grapple productively with climate change. I also, know that this is the first time that any of you has attended an opening of an exhibition where the party was completely virtual. So big ways and small ways, has the uncertainty of this moment changed the way you think about either nature or your artistic practice, or both? We've touched on some of those themes, but I'd love to tease them out a little more. And if I could start here with Rowland.
It's a really great question, and I guess I'd say yes and no. I think that we've tried to fool ourselves into believing that as humans we're really in control. But through working with indigo for half of my life now, and working through a number of years of drought trying to grow indigo, it's become pretty clear to me that we've never really been in charge. Maybe some of you are familiar with Michael Pollan's Botany of Desire, and kind of like the plants in that, it feels for me like the indigo I work with is really controlling me. It gets me out there in the cold of March to plant seeds, and it gets me to harvest it in the heat of summer, and then gather its seeds after it's been killed by a freeze, all to ensure that it'll live again next year by making me, want the color that's in its leaves. And I know you guys were saying like, oh, thinking about nature and seeking solace from the moment was an intention of this exhibit. But I also think that at the same time, in our current moment, I don't think you can put an artwork that references breathing like this one does in Washington, D.C., right across from the White House, and not invoke questions about the inequitable access in our own country to the basic human need to breathe freely.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons we were so drawn to this topic is just how multifaceted and varied it can be, and how much it changes depending on the moment that we're in. Lauren, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the question as well.
Yeah, well, I'll say that, yes, it's my first virtual Zoom open. I'm going to give a shout out to my friend Jeffrey for the sparkling rosé. So in terms of the impact of, I'm going to say, current issues on my process, I was really grateful to have this project during the pandemic. And it's a new work that, I made in the months leading up to now. But, as the world felt like it was falling apart and there were so many uncertainties, I had this singular sense of purpose to get up every day and work on this one piece. And sometimes that was hard and overwhelming, but it was also comforting because I knew what I had to do and it was physical. I feel like so many of our anxieties about the virus, about the climate crisis and the increasing political turmoil, live in these kind of swirling abstractions. But when we return to them as things, there are very real facts and solutions. And I find that incredibly grounding. And in the act of making this piece, it was like I had a physical place, almost like a model of the world that I could touch and shape in my own terms. And it gave me a lot of clarity in the tough moments of the last year. And, philosophically, it was a reminder that we are things, we live amidst things, and we always need to prioritize material realities over cultural narratives. And I feel like that's where sort of my making helps inform how I go about living and sort of my political perspectives.
What about you, Tim? Any shifts in this moment that that you'd love to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the last 18 years that I've lived in the US, I feel like changes and shifts from the first time, global warming and climate change was first being mentioned. And two of the works that I have in the show really refer back to a trip I made back to Australia in 2008, with my partner, Arthur, who is American. And it was Art's first trip to Australia. And we spent a week on Heron Island, which is at the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. I hadn't been to the reef since I was a child, but I had really vivid memories of this sort of underworld, tropical wonderland. And this trip, each day, Art and I snorkeled around this small island, which was surrounded by coral reef. And it was this incredible experience swimming among fish and coral of every colour. It's also an extremely fragile ecosystem. And even back in 2008, we were beginning to witness the effects of global warming, where parts of the reef were beginning to bleach and die back. So it was sort of a very bittersweet trip in some ways. On the one hand, swimming amongst all this beauty and sort of tinged with sadness, knowing that it was under threat and could very likely disappear within our lifetime. So when I got back to the US, I was still feeling haunted by these skeletal forms of coral that we'd seen, and that really prompted me to begin this series of Gorgonian works based on coral sea fans. Gorgonian, again, referring to the Medusa of Greek mythology. Yeah.
Fantastic. So Debora, I want to sort of ask you this question at the same time as I bring you into a question about nature as refuge, which I know is important to you. You've spoken about that a little bit. It's been a long-standing idea in craft, whether we're thinking about the arts and crafts movement, centering of nature, or artists going back to the land in the 60s and the 70s. And I know you in particular see Arborea as offering space for contemplation. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you've spoken a little bit about how the current moment is affecting you, but how this idea of refuge is or isn't present in your work.
Oh, excuse me. So I was going to answer the first question about how has this whole experience changed the way that I work and think about creating work. As a person who's chosen glass as my medium to sculpt with, glass artists work in a very intimate situation where you are very close up and very intimate in protecting each other, helping each other execute your work. So our shop, like I said earlier, has been completely shut down. One of the ways that I create work is that I go out in the field and I study nature. Having this time off of not being able to do the things that I would normally keep my regular routine, it's given me an opportunity to reflect a little bit more out of doors. But being empathetic to our situation, I find myself not as creative as I would like to be. The second question was, how do I find nature as a refuge, is how I understood the question to be. And for me, always as a child, I grew up on military bases and everything seemed so chaotic. And throughout my life as an African-American woman, it's always been like there's one thing after another. And the only time I can find a little peace of mind is with Mother Nature, out in the forest, the desert, anywhere where there's not man-made things, that I can just sit and be at peace and one with nature. And that's really what I'm all about.
And I know that people will feel that way when they come to see your piece in the exhibition.
Well, I really hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my desire, is that you don't have to think about anything. You can just sit and be and just enjoy. And I think that beautiful things stimulate the brain in a special way. And I think that we really need that in our lives right now. So if you do have opportunity to go, just relax and enjoy.
Just being sounds great right about now, I think.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time and I want to make sure that we leave time for questions at the end. So I'm going to actually skip forward a little bit and ask Lauren and Rowland, your installations were either conceived of specifically for or reconfigured for this exhibition. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the process of creating or reimagining your work for the show and how working with the Renwick space in mind impacted what you were doing. And I'll call on Lauren first.
So Emily, as you know, you contacted me initially in May of 2019 about this project, and I was just wrapping up a year of research at the University of Georgia, Athens. And I was in a moment where I was ready for a big project. And you gave me a floor plan and you told me to dream big. So I blame you. And that was my starting point. And from the floor plan and the images of the space, I knew that the Renwick Gallery had this really sort of glorious, quite grand architecture, but the room was actually quite intimate. And so I knew I wanted to make something that had this big impact, but also small moments. And the room is really long. It's 60 feet long. So I knew you would never see the whole piece all at once. And so I tried to think about it almost cinematically, where there would be an opening, kind of like an establishing shot, and then a series of vignettes. And because the room is so narrow, it's only about 16 feet wide, I wanted to really fill the space in a way where you couldn't back up, you couldn't get away from it. It was almost like sticky, like you couldn't escape it once you were inside it. So those are kind of like the physical parameters. And then because of the location, you know, in the heart of DC, really at the footsteps of the White House, I wanted to make a piece that, you know, talked about issues that we're facing together as a country. And then, you know, finally, because of your dream big, I took it as an opportunity to really stretch what I could do, which also led to some like tears and bloody fingers along the way. But it was really great to have such a challenge. So.
Yeah. So you're charging right now.
Fabulous. And so Rowland, you had a little bit of a different situation where the work had been mounted in Japan and you were thinking about translating it into this totally new context. So I'd love to hear about that shift for you.
Yeah, so, you know, beyond the obvious challenge of fitting the work in the space, reconfiguring the installation for the Renwick presented an opportunity to not only rethink the layout, but to also the sound and the lighting components of the installation. So for example, the installation was put up in Tokushima in what was really a cavernous, quite a cavernous space. And so for the installation there, Norbert, the sound artist, created a layout of a giant arc of 48 speakers that really enabled him to physically move the sound through the space. But for the installation here, Norbert was able to return to his original idea of having small, delicate sounds coming out of the speaker boxes. And these really serve as a voice that kind of reach back through the void in the box where the light once passed to leave a sonic impression of the forces that brought the color to cloth in the first place. And then on the lighting front, the original installation had been in a room with no natural light. So we focused there on the feeling of the cloth as it sat in the darkness of the box in people's homes, illuminated, and the cloth was illuminated just by the light passing through the hole. But at the Renwick, we worked with Robbie Hayes of Pixel Lumen and he developed a lighting system that used data-driven global COVID data to really slowly, imperceptibly shift light in the space and recreate that passage of time that's captured in each cloth. So you can see in this short time lapse, this is about 30 minutes of the installation, condensed down to 4 seconds.
Wow. Yeah, and I know that what's so interesting too is that program will change over the run of the show based on new data that's received around COVID statistics locally, nationally, globally. So it really is a piece that's responsive to the moment and the space at the same time. I want to thank everyone for this fantastic conversation. It's just the start of the riches that are in this exhibition, but it's time to move to our audience Q&A. I'll invite folks to submit their questions in the box to the right of the screen, and we will try to answer as many as we can. I want to get us started by asking, for many of you, and Timothy in particular, references to history and historical ways of taming or understanding nature play a key role in your work. And so can you talk about how looking to the past helps you understand our moment?
Sure. So I feel like history is part of my vocabulary to draw from, both conceptual and experiential. It's also, I often think of as being an artist, we have this sort of bag of tricks to draw from, and I definitely see history as being something to draw from. Also in reference to things like irony and being able to contextualize something. The Baroque is really important, obviously, to me in my work, and that sort of 17th, 18th century period was, in many ways, connects with a sort of a dissemblance of appearances, or presenting things in ways in which they may not be as they seem to be. And the two of the works in the show, the 3/4 scale Cinderella-like carriage and the palatial chandelier, instead of a carriage made of carved gilded wood or a chandelier made of glass and crystal, both of these works are made of crystallized rock sugar. And the chandelier looks like it could be of amber, which is something you might see in a Russian palace like Catherine the Great's amber room. But once you know what it's made of, although the carriage looks like a brittle confection that could shatter at any moment, it's in fact quite stable. Under the sugar is a structure of plywood and steel, and the Baroque scroll work is made of scrunched up aluminum foil, hot glued in place. Sugar has been used for centuries to create delicate table centers, and it was some of that history of that craft that I wanted to quote. So, but essentially they're humble materials, just engineered to belie that element of that illusion of fragility.
I have a question next for Rowland. We'd like to know more about what the role of the 450 people involved in the creation of your work was, and what do you think they learned, hope they learned about nature through participating in the project?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when we initially conceived this installation, it was through an invitation from the government of Tokushima, where, as I said earlier, indigo is grown on the largest scale. And we initially thought we'd just work with people in the community there who may be somewhat aware of that history, but really inviting people to come work with dyers in the community there to dye a length of cloth and live with it for 5 months. And the idea being, that fading really is considered kind of a negative thing, right? Like in museums, you work hard to make sure that textiles don't fade and so on. But in fact, everything is going to fade, and it's a very beautiful metaphor for human endeavor. my work with indigo and everyone working with indigo in particular, so much time and energy is spent making the color, and yet at the end of the day, over time, we know it's all going to fade. But through working with fading over time as a metaphor, I've also come to see it as this exchange. And so my hope was that this cloth would then live with people. We opened it up to folks throughout the world and had people from many, many different countries participate. And we sent them a length of cloth dyed with indigo from Tokushima and just asked them to live with it. And the thought that the marks that become captured on the cloth are almost like photographic exposures of their life slowly being captured in the cloth. And at the same time, the cloth is sort of sending its color out into their lives. So it really becomes sort of a metaphor of exchange as well, and interconnectedness through making.
Lauren, I have a question for you now. I'm wondering if you can say a few words, both about why your work is in all black and how you came to start to work in all black instead of color. And also if you can talk a little bit about the title of the piece.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the black, initially inspired, there's an object that I've been obsessed with for the last 20 years, which is called the Claude glass. There are actually two black mirrors that I've been obsessed with. One is the Claude glass, which was an optical device allegedly created by the painter Claude Lorraine, which was a black mirror that amateur artists would use to go out into the landscape, and rather than paint directly from nature, they would use this mirror to find a composition and paint from the mirror. And I think it's just such an apt metaphor for the ways that rather than looking at what's directly in front of us, we see the world through these cultural lenses. So in one way, the black for me, it's kind of like this brushstroke that shows you that everything you're seeing is something that I'm showing you through a lens. And then I've also been looking at scrying mirrors, which are these, it's a history, you know, in Babylonia, they used black oil, and the Aztecs used carved obsidian. But there's a tradition of divining the future in the reflection of a black mirror. So I love those two references. And what was the other question?
If you can talk a little bit about where the title of the work comes from.
Oh, so I have to give credit to a dear friend of mine and an amazing artist, Anne Riesenberg, who's a poet who worked with me. So that title was really a collaboration. I felt like kind of such an over-the-top piece needed an over-the-top title. And I'll say the title again. It's The Totality of Time Lusters the Dusk. And I've been thinking a lot about the notion of time. I feel like a lot of the work I've done over the last 20 years was about, it was ontology. It was like understanding what is a thing. And now I'm thinking a lot more about causality. What are the relationships between things? And so like where in the past, a lot of the works I've done were a landscape, here for the first time, you're really seeing an event in a landscape. And I think it's politically an important way to look at the world, especially living in a country where we have these theories of individuality, of, that we and all things are so connected and unfolding over time. And even the simplest thing like a tree is really an event that unfolds over 200 years and constant change. So I wanted this title that sort of expressed the breadth of time and how we are so impacted by the past, and the past may have already predicted our future, and we are sort of suspended between those things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lauren. Timothy, I want to ask you, can you talk a little bit about how materiality is tied into the aspects of nature that you choose to express in your work?
Yeah, so I think going back to the the Gorgonian works, I think that the choice of material, choosing to make coral using coral fans, using bronze. Bronze has a very sort of heroic, romantic history in connection to statuary, and it's something that I avoided as a sculptor. It's something that I avoided using for a long time. I cast a lot of work using aluminum and really avoided using bronze for a long time. And but it's a practical material to use if you're casting things from a foundry. And but I feel like I'm pushing it in a technically. It's a difficult thing. What I'm asking it to do, it's difficult to do technically, creating these fan-like linear objects. I don't. Again, to sort of subvert that lusciousness of bronze. I don't opt for patination to color the bronze. I'm preferring to kind of keep a sort of a neutrality in as a material, and so nickel plating it, I think keeps that, but also it the plating kind of, I think, really as well as sort of neutralizing the material, I think it does create something almost skeletal and haunting on that level.
Thank you, Tim. Unfortunately, those are all the questions that we have time for tonight. I think you can tell we've barely scratched the surface on the content of this fantastic exhibition and on the riches that are a part of these artists' work. I want to thank Lauren, Timothy, Debora, and Rowland for the conversation tonight, and to thank everyone for joining us for the open house. Forces of Nature Renwick Invitational 2020 will be on view at the Renwick Gallery from October 16th to June 27th, 2021. I hope that many of you will have a chance to see it in person, and if you don't, there's a host of online resources, programs, and opportunities to connect with these amazing artists that will be available online throughout the duration of the show. Thank you again to everyone for being here. I'd like to welcome back the director of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Stephanie Stebich, for a closing remark.
Thank you. This wraps up our program for the evening. I'm so grateful to the wonderful presentations by the artists we're celebrating tonight. Of course, our juror, Emily Zilber, all of you again for tuning in. Nora, thank you for your remarks as well that opened the evening. I remind you that the exhibition opens a little later this week, October 16th, and will be on view through June 27th, 2021. We have a handsome and informative catalog that I recommend to you. You can purchase it online, and for those of us who joined at the opening event tonight, there's a special discount code which is offered. Please know that this program will also be recorded and shared on our website. You're welcome to come back and view it again or share it with others who may have missed the evening's program. Thank you again for supporting SAAM through your presence, through your enthusiasm, and your ongoing support. Hope to see you in the galleries soon. Thank you.